Yo, it's in New York. Yo, it's in New York. Yo, it's in New York. To New York, to New York. With the yo, it's in New York. Yo, it's in New York. Yo, it's in New York. To New York, to New York.
And that was Yo Into New York by Malibu Shark Attack, featuring Jesse Dangerously, available on both iTunes and Bandcamp. And welcome to the first edition of Crash Chords Autographs, a new sub-series from Crash Chords featuring a variety of informal audio interviews from near and far. As an analytical reprieve from our main feature, the Crash Chords podcast, this series is a chance for co-host Matt Storm to get up close and personal with artists and innovators in a casual medium and discuss everything from current projects to inspirations, and of course topics of their choice. Today's episode looks at two artists, consecutively Mark Young of Hed PE and then Spider One of Powerman 5000. Both bands are on tour starting in August, and they each have brand new albums out this year, Hed PE's Evolution and Powerman's Builders of the Future. So without further ado, Matt Storm and Mark Young.
Thank you for calling today. Thank you for agreeing to do the interview. I appreciate it. I personally am a big fan of you guys. I remember when you came out with the first album or your second album rather, Broke in 97, I heard it on the radio in high school, and it was like unlike anything I'd ever heard before, because I hadn't really heard a lot of hip hop metal at the time, and not definitely anything that heavy. And
you talking about the first album?
The second album with Bartender?
Second album. Right.
That's when I got hooked and then went back and got the first album. But Bartender was like, back then was mind blowing for me in 2000.
All right.
I hadn't heard anything like that before, you know?
That's good to hear. It definitely gave us a shot in the arm back then for a little while, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was all over K-Rock in New York when it first came out, and I would listen to the radio all the time back when radio was the way to hear new music, unlike now where
right.
you have to look up everything.
Yeah, I gave up radio when the number of commercials exceeded the number of songs.
Right? That is, I think, what's going to eventually be the full downfall of radio, and internet radio and podcasting is going to probably be the future, because you can just download for free whatever the hell you want to listen to and not have to deal with commercials.
I would think so. Take it back to the music, which is really where it started.
Yes. So let's start with a little bit about you. So you're obviously the bass player for Hed PE. How long have you been playing bass? Since you're a kid?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up too, because one of my friends I haven't heard of since I was a kid sent me a picture from '92 a couple of days ago, and it was my very first jam with my only music buddy who played drums at the time, and we looked like a couple of dorks sitting there in his bedroom. But that was when I first started. I got my first bass Christmas of 1981.
Wow!
It only took me like 18 months to convince my parents it wasn't another fad. So they finally got it, and I think at this point I proved that I'm doing it for the duration.
Yeah, I'd say it's safe to say in 2014 that you've stuck with it long enough to convince them it's a career.
Yeah, it's true.
And so you and you only two of the band members are the original band members still. You have two newer members, but you've been in the band since the very beginning, since Hed PE first started.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I met Jared when I first came to the country, when I was looking for a band. And we had a band for a couple of years before Hed PE, and then I've been with him in the band ever since.
Awesome. And I got to hear the sample of the new record, Evolution. It sounds great. I'm really digging it. My next question is, what would you say is the newest thing you're bringing to this new record? What's different from the older records?
Well, it kind of segues into the title Evolution. Mm-hmm. In a way, we've been playing music all our lives, and in our signed years, 20 years now, 18 years we've been signed, pretty much 20 years we've devoted every minute of the day to Hed PE since it started in '94, and we've explored every style. Like you were saying in high school, you heard us mixing the hip-hop with the rock, and we'd already been doing that for a few years. We've gone through the punk phase, we've mixed punk with hip-hop, we spent a lot of time exploring dub and reggae. And on this album, I think after all the quote-unquote avant-garde albums we've released over the last few years, this time the writing style kind of went back to the roots of rock. Jackson, our guitarist, is a phenomenal writer, and he's like a sponge when it comes to music. And he went back and studied old Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and all the greats that inspired us way back when. And then his writing then reflected that, but in his own way. We play in drop tuning, we tune down the B, so everything's going to sound lower and more ominous anyway. But there was a certain homage paid to our roots in the writing of this record, and I think that reflects in the music too.
Yeah, I can definitely say that I hear that as a fan of the music, because Broke and the follow-up that came out in 2004 were the two big influential albums for me first getting into heavier music. And I've loved all your records since, but those two were the ones that I latched onto. And it sounds like that new record is going kind of style, but taking it to a new.
Oh, it's maybe. I'm sure there's influences from those albums that they can't not be, because that was us back then.
Yes.
But I think it's very subtle where this album goes, because it goes in both directions. It's a glimpse into the future of where we're going, but it's also a glimpse into the past of where we came from. So it really traces our own personal evolution as musicians when we were kids, listening to those bands and then going through all our exploration and then coming back to that kind of classic rock sound that we started with.
Awesome. And I know you mentioned influences before a bit that Jackson has been pulling from for his writing. Do you have any bass greats that you identify with that really influence your bass playing?
Well, I would have to say right up front, Geddy Lee is my favorite bass player, and it was jamming along to Rush records is how I learned to play.
Right.
And also Iron Maiden at the time, Steve is a phenomenal bass player, though I never really went down his style of playing. Later on, I really got into Flea, and I really got into Primus. I love what Les does, and I think he's the consummate musician. He never stops working. So he's very much influenced me. And recently I've been kind of going back to bass players. I don't even know their names, like the Average White Band. Are you familiar with them?
Yes.
A Scottish funk band that blew up in L.A. Oh, my God, that guy holds down the pocket so tightly, and his lines are so simple but so funky. And I don't even know the guy's name, but he rules. I really enjoy listening to him. And a lot of reggae bass players in recent years, like Jared particularly, is a huge reggae fan, and we've obviously taken more of a reggae direction in recent years, exploring that
Sure.
genre of music, which has taken me back to exploring reggae bass, which is fascinating to me, as I find they're not the typical shredders like we are in the rock world, trying to fit as many notes in the measure as you can. They're about what they don't play. Space is very important to them. So I've learned that, and Jared schooled me a lot over the years. Pay attention, when we listen to hip-hop, the bass or the 808 will drop out, and it creates that kind of tension release that reggae does, where the bass drops, you're waiting for it to come back, and then it comes back. It just creates dynamics in the music. So I've been studying a lot of reggae bass to improve my own dynamics, because I've got it down to where I can play as many notes as I want. So now I have to relearn it, take my ego out of it, and learn when not to play. So I pay a lot of attention now to the bass players that show me what not to do, rather than the ones that show me how many notes I can play.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, in Jared's singing style, it's always come across that he's got this reggae and hip hop influence, which, obviously reflects the rest of the music too, because you want to take it in direction where all of the sounds support each other and then can even go somewhere completely different together.
It's very true. That is very true. And also, as musicians, we can tend to, get off a little on showing off and playing a little more than we should. And you tend to end up stepping on the toes of the singer, which can be detrimental to the song.
Sure.
So, as an artist over the years, I'm learning to be more attentive to what's going on around me, and feed off that rather than just throw my notes out and expect them to fit in everywhere.
Sure.
So I've been trying to go through my own personal evolution as a bass player as the band evolves through its own musical journey.
And the next thing I wanted to ask you was, where do you draw a lot of your, I mean, we talked about your influences, but do you draw inspiration for your albums just from other music, or do you write about things that happen? You know, do you help to write, you know, create a mood based on things that are going on in your life, on tour, at home? You know, where does your inspiration for writing music come from?
Well, I would say that question would be much more applicable to Jared, because Jared writes all the lyrics.
Okay.
So his lyrics are drawn from every aspect of his life, from personal things he's dealing with on a day-to-day basis, into personal relationships, or politics that he's seeing in the world, or a social cause that he wants to draw attention to. So whatever's going on in the world around us will definitely fuel what's coming out. For me personally, you know, I wouldn't say my bass playing is particularly inspired by what's going on or what's not going on in the world around me. If I'm in a good mood, I'll pick up my bass and just play for the joy of it.
Right. Well, then I guess a better follow-up question would be, not necessarily, you know, what inspires you to write, but how does the writing process work? So obviously, you know, you guys write the music and the lyrics. Will Jared come with a great set of lyrics and you guys kind of build music around it? Or is it that you guys build up the music as a foundation and then he writes lyrics to go with that music?
Well, in recent times, there's been generally two ways the music's been approached. On this new album, there's 8 rock songs in a row, and then reggae songs. Now, the reggae songs Jared had approached at home, working on his own ideas, his own musical ideas, and his own lyrical ideas and melodies, and constructed the blueprints of those songs at home. And then when we were on tour, to bear in mind, we live in all 4 corners of the country now, so rehearsal happens on stage 30 minutes before the first show of tour as we jam for sound check. That's the only time we get to play together. So over the course of the last couple of tours, Jared would show us his reggae ideas, and we jam them out as a band day after day till they evolved and became their own entities. And now the rock songs, on a similar tip, Jackson spends all his time at home just creating music of all kinds. That's what he does all the hours he's awake. And he came back after a long break with a whole slew of awesome songs that Jared kind of referred to as doom metal, a lot of dark, grungy stuff. And we started jamming that day after day at Soundcheck 2 until we next had a break in tour and started recording it. And then I think Jared did all the vocals last, and being the perfectionist that he is, some of them had 3, 4, 5 rewrites till he was happy with what he got put down.
Cool. It's interesting how the fact that you guys are spread across the country now, you know, it is so easily manageable than probably more easily manageable than it was back in, you know, 97, or in a situation, you know, back then. Recording across the world is almost impossible without, you know, MP3s and computers at their advance. But now you guys probably can send each other stuff constantly. So, you know,
we've run the spectrum from the first album, recorded in a very expensive, I think back then it was like $1,300 a day, farm recording studio up in Massachusetts. It had this huge sound stage that had been built for the Rolling Stones back in the 70s. You know, in-house catering, everything was just overly done. So much money thrown around. Then fast forward 9 albums, we had to today. We had the drums recorded at the Mushroom Head studio in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Jackson went into a studio somewhere near where he lives in Michigan and recorded guitars along to drum machine beats that were later on synced up. I did my bass tracks at the beginning of this year. Half of them were done in a hotel room till we had to check out and go to the next show. The other half were done at the side of the stage, running a line out of the back of my rig with my headphones jammed in my ears while Smile Empty Soul was sound checking. And so we were just taking any opportunity that we could to get these tracks laid down. Very punk rock and about as far away from the major label days as you could possibly get.
Sure.
Probably a lot more fun doing it this way, I would say, too.
Well, yeah, it probably feels a lot more personal and much more your own too, doing it this way. The idea of just picturing you sitting with the headphones in while another band's sound checking, trying to get the tracks down. It's interesting that you can even do that now, because even a decade ago, you didn't have that kind of recording capability. And now I just heard, I forget what article I was reading where, but the least plug cables that actually have a recording device in them, so you can just record as you're playing the show and just record the whole slew of bass lines
Really?
or guitar riffs while playing the show. It won't pick up the vocals because the recorder's in the jack, but it'll record everything you're playing, which I think is brilliant, because then you can just record a ton of bass work from a live show, pull it apart, and do what you want with it, which is kind of neat.
That's amazing.
And
How long till we get the call like, hey, Mark Jackson, we got these cardboard cutouts and some really clever guitar cables, and they're just pretending to be you guys can stay at home.
Right. Just put up the cardboard cutouts, and then you can, relax and just eat and chill out while, the cardboard characters play for you.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be quite the same thing.
No, I don't think so, and I think you'd miss the on-stage fun, I'm sure. Do you enjoy touring? Do you like touring around with the guys? I imagine so.
Oh, I do. I mean, touring is really in the blood after a while. We've been doing it so long that, you come home, and after a while I start to get a little bit restless. But I also find you have to make the most of tour. We're only on stage for an hour at night. So that leaves 23 hours of your life that you can either choose to waste, or you can do whatever you want with it. Now, personally, for me, I'm not an American, so I came to this country with wide open eyes, and I'm a permanent tourist. So I travel with a road bike, and I log in 30 to 40 miles per day on show days, a little more on days off, but I just explore the country, and that's what keeps me sane, really. It gives me a reason to go out there every day.
That's awesome. So you say you weren't born here, so where are you originally from?
A place called Newcastle in England that's known only really for beer. Used to be known for building ships and coal and a band called The Police, but I think now it's only known for Newcastle Brown Ale.
Which is a fantastic ale, but I think people still remember The Police. They don't play. They played together like 2 years ago for one night only, which I thought was bizarre. But, they're still around doing stuff here and there.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for Sting. I actually read his autobiography a few years ago. It's a great story. And, that name Sting always kind of sounded pretty tough when we were all kids, and he was a lot older. And then I read in his autobiography, it's because he showed up to band practice in a striped black and yellow sweater, and the band leader started calling him Sting because he looked like a bumblebee, and it stuck. I thought it was a great, completely un-rock star-ish way to get a name.
Right, which he then built into one of the biggest names in music. Absolutely. And rock stardom, and it's just it's great showing you that dynamic on how you can really make of yourself whatever you want, work for it, because getting thrusted in a nickname that's so silly and then making it your own.
Very true. Very true.
So the new album comes out on July 22nd. Do you have a particular track that's your favorite on the album, or is it one of those, you can't pick, you love them all?
I don't have a particular favorites. And for the first time ever, I can honestly say that there's no track that I would even skip on this album right now. I've said it quite a few times at this point. I could walk on stage and play this album from song number 1 to song number 12 in that order and walk off, and I think we would have just done a top-class show. Would have just rocked. But right now, I think my favorite song would have to be One More Body. It's just a rocking song. It's our first single. It's a challenge to play. There's nothing easy about that song. It's just riff after riff and a lot of up and down dynamics. So that's going to push us live, and I think people are going to get hurt in the pit. So I apologize in advance for that.
Well, they should be able to take care of themselves. If they're going to a Hed PE show in the first place, they should know what they're getting.
Yes, they should.
One of my personal favorites from the catalog was always Swan Dive. Coming up, a song like Swan Dive, because it talks about dealing with yourself and your emotions, and when you're having trouble as someone in high school who had a rough time. That was one of those songs that I could vent listening to that song and really get through. So that happens to be one of my favorite of the discography. Do you have a favorite song to perform on stage in particular? One that you just have a lot of fun with?
Fist Fire is quite fun to play because, again, it's a challenging song. But I think at this point, my favorite songs to play are the new ones.
Well, that's,
like I said,
that's
One More
great.
Body. No Turning Back is slamming too. The reggae ones, because it gives us a chance. Like, I don't know if you've heard any of the reggae songs on this album. Like Nowhere to Go is a song we've been playing live now for several months. And we actually got to rush into a studio for about a couple of hours towards the end of the tour a couple of months ago and just jam everything out live. And it was amazing. It sounded like we were this band in Jamaica sitting around a bong jamming a track, but we were really just rushing the sound check in Louisville, Kentucky. So that came out great.
That's awesome. The fact that you guys can just sit down and in a hurry still make this awesome jam that feels authentic and that feels like of the era that you're trying to create with this reggae sound is really awesome. It's exciting to hear about that, and I'm sure it'll be great to hear on the record.
And it's fun for us because it's a huge switch in dynamic. Like, obviously you've heard One More Body, the new single, and then from that straight into a dub song is challenging to us, but it feels real, and it's something we really pull off well. And the contrast, the dynamics in our song from the metal to the punk to the dub, it's really a sweet thing.
Well, sure. And, as a band, I imagine playing the same kind of music over and over again, you guys, I'm sure, flew around playing cover, messing around with cover riffs and stuff that you've played that you were playing, like you're saying that you love Geddy Lee. So obviously you played your fair share of Rush tracks, but being able to play something that's not even within any of the vein of what you're used to playing, something that's so uniquely different is great. And it also lends to the evolution of the band. The fact that you're evolving into this other sound and playing with it and making it your own as well is, it's an awesome step in keeping everything fresh and keeping fans into it,
It really is like that. I mean, it keeps us on our toes as a band because we're always moving forward. It keeps me on my toes personally because if, for example, a few years ago, we got kind of interested in listening to a lot of Curtis Mayfield and kind of approaching some old school music like that. But that sent me back to getting on YouTube and on iTunes and buying music and starting to study bass players that I maybe never heard of or only given a cursory glance to in decades gone by. So that would make me go back to school for a short while, studying this bass player, then the next bass player. That would increase my own musical knowledge along the way. Again, back to our own evolution. You can choose to evolve or just stay the same. And I think if we're going to do this for our careers, we have to evolve. We don't really have a choice.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Speaking of which, so one thing you mentioned a couple minutes ago is always intrigued me about Swan Dive. Mm-hmm. And I guess you kind of cleared something up about how you were going through maybe some tough times, so you could relate to that. Because we stopped playing that song after 2003, after the band changed lineup and we moved away from the major labels and more into an independent world. And also Jared, who'd been in a different mindset at that time, back in 2001, whenever, didn't want to play that song now because the song really is about suicide,
right.
Taking a swan dive into the asphalt. And his whole mindset had changed. He became a father and had a family. So suicide was the last thing on his mind, and inspiring other people to even think about it is probably the last thing on his mind too. So it would kind of floor us every night. We'd be in the middle of the show, we'd take a little break, and the Swan Dive chant would start. And it's like, why that song of all songs? Do people want to hear about suicide? So now we'll play it a lot of times now, but it's not, obviously our hearts are not really into it because the message is not something that we really are trying to put out there.
Sure. Well, I think for me, the reason I related to it in high school is not because I wanted to commit suicide, but because I struggled with thoughts of that kind of stuff, and being able to kind of vent about it and sing about it kept me from doing it, kept me from wanting to do it. It allowed me to get angry, rage, and kind of vent and know that someone else was feeling the way I felt. And was writing music to get it out, and I was listening to music to get it out. So for me, and I think a lot of the other fans, I relate to the song because they've been there, and they like that this song exists, so they were able to keep themselves from having those dark thoughts, and they were able to relate to someone who also was.
For sure, and I guess it would make people in that situation not feel so alone. I was like, I'm not the only person going through this.
Well, it's just like also like what I loved about Blackout and that album and that song was, the idea that all of these things that are messed up in the world make you want to scream till you black out. This fact that you're frustrated and you can't do anything about it. Like, I think a lot of people identify with the anger and frustration that Jared had conveyed in his lyrics, especially in those earlier albums. And even later, I think people really, like, for me personally, I'm an emotional music listener, and I talked a lot about on my podcast how relating to an album emotionally is almost the most important thing for me. And it's because, when I'm angry, I don't want to hurt anybody else. I don't want to hurt myself. So an angry song lets me vent that rage without harming anyone or myself, And I think a lot of people take comfort in songs that you can relate to and get those energies out. Just like I'm sure Jared's written lyrics to get that energy out instead of keeping it inside.
Oh, absolutely. I think as artists, you have to exercise those demons. Exorcise, not exercise.
Yes.
That's for sure. And, obviously I was around during the blackout days, too. There was a lot of pain expressed in those lyrics, and there was reasons for that. And it had to be processed out, I guess, to move on.
Yeah. And I mean, and it sounds like, Jared's at a place now where he's got other things, and that's great. And I think that's one of the things I love about music personally, is that everybody interprets it differently, but everyone can rely on it for what they need it, whether it's just to enjoy themselves, to have fun, or to vent, or to move on, or to feel, It's a versatile medium that affects so many people differently. And I think that's the most fascinating thing about it, how fans react to music, how artists express themselves in music.
I completely agree. It's one of those rare, beautiful things in the world, music, that it's both subjective and objective, I feel. It's very objective because it is what it is. It's created out of instruments using the fixed notes in the scale. But how it affects each person is very, very subjective. It can move one person to laughter. It can move another person to tears.
Yeah.
The amount of emotion that can be triggered by music is something special. Any type of art that can do that is something to be treasured, I think.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, it's something we talk about when we review albums every week. It's like, we say we think the artist is in this mindset, but ultimately we're mostly putting what we feel on it because we can't obviously know what the artist was going through. We're not that person. So we're kind of making an educated guess based on the tone of the music, the lyrics, and whatever else. But honestly, we could be completely off. They could have been writing about X and it's actually about Y, and it is fascinating how it can go that way. You had said earlier that you spend a lot of time on tour and you only play for about an hour or so. When you're on stage, you like to fill the time with other stuff to obviously keep yourself busy. What are your hobbies besides obviously playing bass or riding bike? Do you have anything that you do to unwind, like watching movies, playing video games, that kind of a thing?
None of the latter. I have, I'm a lot older probably than you and most people, so I've tried everything that's pretty much caught my attention over the years, but really it all distilled down to three things in my life. My three passions are yoga, music, and nature. And I practice my yoga every day, not just a physical class, but it's a lifestyle. It's an inner way of being, not just an outer way of being. Music is self-explanatory. That is my job, but it also is my life. I've been playing musical instruments since I was about 6 or 7. They picked me literally when I was a kid in school in England. They picked certain people to be given musical tuition, and that's how it started. So music is where it started and always comes back to, for me, if I'm in a bad mood or just bummed, I'll pick up my bass, and a few minutes later that mood's totally shifted. And then lastly, nature. I mean, to be out in nature is my highest purpose day to day. I just want to be out in the forest here. I moved to where I live now so I could be in the middle of nowhere. It's just good for the soul. It keeps me at peace.
Sure. Yeah. So do you go camping as well and, go out into the wilderness for long periods of time?
Camping, backpacking, mountain biking, even road biking in Central Oregon. When you go out east in the high desert, you can be on a road and not see a car for 35 minutes.
Wow.
But backpacking up in the volcanoes in the summertime is, oh man, it's like you're in heaven. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. I mean, the little bit of camping I've done in New York is upstate. There's some great campgrounds, and I've gone for a week or so. But we don't have volcanoes here. So definitely an
No,
awesome
but
sight to see.
New York has some great outdoors. So there's some great cycling up around Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie itself is a bit of a, well, take it or leave it town, but there's some great outdoors around there.
Yeah.
Syracuse, even outside of Rochester, there's a lot of good stuff in New York.
Yeah, absolutely.
Manhattan's an exciting place to ride a bike. I think the first and so far last time I ever got hit by a taxi obviously, was New York late at night, and I was drunk. It was after a show. I was riding back to a hotel after, it was one of the Broke shows when we were big and playing at Roseland or something. And riding back to my hotel, I'm used to California where everybody in the car is respectful of cyclists because they don't want to get sued. And this cab just came up behind me and just pushed me out of the way. Totally bent my wheel and just turned me off riding in New York for quite some time.
Wow, yeah. Well, I see bike riders in New York because I work in Midtown, and so I walk around and see them, and I give them a lot of credit because I can barely handle driving in the city, so I can't even imagine being on a bike in the city because you have a lot less protection on a bike than in a car.
Yeah. It's fun, but it's exciting. It keeps you on your toes. And since I first started riding in New York, because I've been riding there since probably 99, 2000, they now put in the bike trail that runs all around Manhattan Island.
Yeah.
That's a great place to ride.
You guys, I'm sure, so you're not on tour now, but you guys are going on tour soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, I fly out and meet up with the fellas on the 5th of July, and then we have a video shoot at the legendary Al Rosa in Columbus, Ohio on the following day, and then we begin a 2-week tour leading into the Gathering. And then we go out in August till early September, co-headline and run with Powerman 5000.
That's incredible. Those guys are great. I'm a fan of theirs too. They started coming out with albums around the same time as you guys, if I remember correctly, around the mid to late 90s.
Well, we used to play shows with them back in the day. Not too often, but we did have quite a few shows. And the guitarist, to be honest, I don't know if he's still in the band because I have yet to look at that current lineup, so I'm probably sounding like a fool here, but the guitarist back then was a friend of ours. He played in a couple of other local bands around Huntington Beach right about when we were first coming out and when Korn had really set the scene there and they were moving on and we were kind of inheriting that. So it'd be good to see the Powerman guys again. It's been long enough.
Yeah, they actually just put out a new record that I've been listening to a lot on Spotify as well. And I'm really digging it. I mean, I always like their sound too because they're a band who has a special sound that they work towards with this kind of sci-fi metal that they've always played, and it's always been fantastic, you know.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear that you guys are going on tour with them. I imagine you guys are coming to New York at some point, yeah?
Well, you just called me out. I just pulled up my itinerary to see if we did have a New York show, and I was going to tell you, but no, I think we got Rochester and Poughkeepsie is all.
Oh, okay. Well, when you guys are in New York again, I'll definitely have to come check you out. I'm excited for the new album.
But keep my number and drop me a line. I'll hook you up on the guest list.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Mark. That's great. One of the final questions I just want to ask is, it's a little bit cliche, but I like to hear what artists say because, you know, as someone who tried playing instruments as a kid but never really picked it up and took the more production side of it and is more interested in the mixing and the post stuff, do you have any advice to aspiring musicians or even aspiring artists of any kind, you know, words of wisdom, something you would tell them, especially if they're struggling with the medium, you know, what your advice to them would be?
Well, yeah, and I'm a walking cliche, so I can just give a cliched answer. Don't stop, keep going, and then when you're older, teach your kids to do the same. There's nothing like music for changing the direction of a kid's life.
Yeah. No,
and even if you suck at it, just keep going with it. It's fun. It's better than a video game, man. At least you're creating something.
Yeah, totally. I think that music, however you use it, whether you're creating it or listening to it, is very important to development of any kind. And like, I have a young nephew and niece who listen to a lot of music. Some kids show stuff and some actual pop music, and I'm trying to push them in the direction of classic rock and other stuff too, because, you know, I think it's important that they hear all that kind of stuff, you know.
Oh, I think so too. And there's even been scientific studies that have proven that the brain is positively affected by playing a musical instrument, which makes simple sense, just the hand-eye coordination, learning to use two hands on a keyboard or on a guitar neck takes a hell of a lot of concentration. And then by the time you get to the point where that's second nature and you're not thinking about it, that's happened because your whole brain has evolved to the point where it's taken in a whole new skill set. So you're growing every time you study an instrument. There's nothing like music.
Yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating when I hear about another program at a school cutting the music funding or the arts funding. It's like you're cutting out the most important part of someone's development. Math and science are important, but so is the art. You need all of it. It's all part of development. And cutting those programs is just, it's mind-boggling to me how anyone could think that's a good idea,
Yes. And as a cynic, I would go out on a limb and say it's because education has not really been the prime purpose of the educational system in recent years. I don't think the goal is to bring out aware, awake, and advanced children anymore.
Yeah, I know. I probably agree. Because when I was growing up, the way we were taught and the way education was approached was even different than it is now. And I feel like they're more concerned about cutting corners and not setting people up for the actual future and actual life, and getting out there. Yeah,
and also maybe a really sharp, smart, and aware youth will turn around and ask the powers that be, "What the hell are you doing?" Right now they'd rather have a dumb populace that doesn't want to ask questions. Yeah. Perhaps, maybe I'm completely wrong there.
Well, it's hard as you get older and see the things that come ahead of you or before you and not be cynical. You grow up and you look back on what you had and you think that you had it good or that the system is not as good as it used to be, kind of a thing. So it's hard sometimes to not be cynical, especially when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I even get cynical to myself, when I've learned, oh, wait a minute, that's how it really works. And I look back on 20 years of me taking something else for granted and not even questioning it.
Yeah. And that's never easy either. So I want to thank you again, Mark, for talking to me. It's been a pleasure as a fan and as someone who enjoys music as much as I do. So the album is called Evolution. It comes out on July 22nd. The tour is starting very soon. And I'm excited to see if you come to New York. It'd be a pleasure to meet you and the guys. But good luck on your tour with the new album. I'm going to tell the world about it because I'm excited for it myself. I appreciate you taking this time. This will be when it goes up on my podcast. I'll go ahead and tweet at you guys so you can see the link and share it around and listen to it. And I'm hoping to write up the article within the next couple of days. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks it'll be online.
Sounds good, Matt. Hey, I appreciate you taking the time and thanks for all your support.
Thanks, Mark. Take care. You have a great night.
See you at the show, my friend.
Yes. Bye.
Take care.
A week later, Matt got the chance to speak with the frontman of Hed PE's touring mate, Powerman 5000. So please enjoy this special double interview, Matt Storm and Spider 1.
Hello, Spider.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you, man?
I'm good. Good.
I want to just start off by thanking you for doing the interview tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No problem.
And I'm a huge fan of the new record. I think it's great. I'm excited that you guys have a new record out.
Yeah, me too. All the time. But,
yeah.
I'm really happy with it too. It's just one of those records that kind of came together nicely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
You start out trying to do something, you actually accomplish it. Once in a while. So,
I actually spoke to a few weeks back. I did an interview with Mark Young from Hed PE.
Cool.
And he mentioned that you guys are going on tour together this summer. So I'm going to try and check you out when you guys get to New York. So,
great. Cool.
Which will be exciting.
Sure.
But the first thing I want to start with, of course, is I know you're obviously promoting the new record, which just came out. And as I recall, you're also doing Great American Nightmare this year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And Nicole had mentioned that. So in case the listeners don't really know anything about Great American Nightmare, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Great American Nightmare was this thing. It actually started last year. It was sort of like this, obviously Rob, it was Rob's sort of brainchild to have his own basic, Halloween, haunt. And so it was a mixture of scary mazes that you might see at like Universal Studios or something, and then mixed with music. And so last year they did outside of LA, and there was music every night, and so you go through the mazes and go see a band. But this year they moved it to Phoenix, Arizona, or Scottsdale, and I think the only musical acts are going to be us and Rob. So it's going to be pretty special that, and I'm, honored that he chose us to be part of it, because it was such a crazy fun thing to do last year. I mean, Halloween is like, my favorite holiday, and it's so,
sure.
Doing a show based around Halloween is really, it's just, there's something sort of magical that happened, because people are in costumes, and there's this all, just a whole other vibe. So I'm really looking forward to doing it again.
Cool. Yeah, as a Powerman 5000 fan and knowing your albums over the years, I'd never guessed that you like costumes and Halloween and any of that stuff. It doesn't.
Yes, I know. I know. It's not too obvious.
One thing I've always wanted to ask is, so I've been personally a Powerman 5000 fan since Mega Kung Fu Radio. So way back in the day. I'm dating myself a little bit, but we'll move past that. So I was curious because obviously back then the album cover and even some of the songs didn't really have the same sci-fi vibe that a lot of the later stuff had after the fact. What caused that shift? Why did you decide to move more towards this kind of sci-fi aesthetic?
Well, I think, the band from the very beginning, if you look back to, the records before Mega Kung Fu Radio, Independence, we put out True Force, and Blood Splat rating system and all this, they were always, knee deep in pop culture, and there, a lot of the referencing with Mega Kung Fu Radio, it's not inherently science fiction, but there's references to Jaws and Taxi Driver and, just that, comic books and stuff like that. And, the name of the band itself, True Force, our first EP we ever put out, has a, giant robot on the cover, and, so things like that. But yeah, it wasn't until, I think, and it's funny because, obviously I've always been influenced by all that stuff and science fiction in particular, but it wasn't until, quite honestly, I think we got what kicked it into high gear was when we signed to DreamWorks, and then when we made Tonight the Stars Revolt, we actually got a real budget to make a music video. And so at that point I was like, well, fuck, I'm going to get, this was the days when they give you $500,000 to make a video. So like, well, I want to make a fucking like science fiction movie, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, sort of like, childhood fantasy, making my version of Flash Gordon or whatever. And so when we made the video for Worlds Collide, it, obviously took off and became sort of, our biggest success. And so then, of course, that identity of science fiction thing got solidified with the band, and, and it just kind of became the thing that we did. And, it wasn't necessarily because of the success. I loved doing it. And, but it's interesting how it was more of an opportunity. I could finally do it correctly. And then that became, something I just kept doing,
Yeah, I remember I think it was high school when Tonight the Stars Revolt came out, and I'd already known of you guys from Mega Kung Fu Radio. I remember hearing that song on the radio and going, what the hell is this? Where did this come from? Like, I remember me and all my friends at the time, because there was, I mean, in that time, a lot of bands were coming out that had a sort of a kind of sound like that. But the thing that I thought that was different about Powerman is, this how steeped it was in this kind of space and sci-fi, which really a lot of bands didn't do at the time. I mean, Rob had been doing since White Zombie this kind of, darker thing, but he was really the only one steeped in some kind of pop culture related thing. Beyond that, a lot of the bands were very, very kind of face value. And so it was cool as a nerd growing up to have this band that was like, oh, they made a science fiction music video and songs that are about space. Well,
I think if you also are a fan of that kind of stuff or in that world, then, you can sniff bullshit, and it probably seemed authentic to you, and so, I always liked, what I liked about, there were certain bands that, and there's not a lot of them, because most bands don't really think beyond, a song. They just think, well, this is what I do. But then there are those certain bands, like Rob, like us, or even like outside the genre, like say like a Beastie Boys or something, where you're like, you love the music, but you're like, I fucking know these guys, even though you don't, or if you don't know them personally, because of what they talk about, the kind of clothes they wear, the kind of movies they reference, you get a sense of like, oh, I would be friends with this guy if I knew him because we like the same shit, you know. And I always liked that when you found artists like that. And I always wanted Powerman to sort of be that thing where it felt like more than just the songs. You know, it was more of a cultural thing or a lifestyle thing where you became more invested in it because you felt a deeper connection other than like, that's a catchy song, you know what I mean? So in a lot of bands, they would see something and maybe they would dabble in it, but it didn't feel like that was really them, you know. Whereas I think with us and Rob and a handful of others, like you believe it, like, yeah, these guys live and breathe this shit and they believe in it, you know. And so that's why I probably connected with so many people, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure that's why it connected with me, hands down.
Well, not to mention the ironic part of the whole thing is that how that whole culture has become so mainstream and so accepted. You know, it's like when I was a kid growing up, you know, if you could even find like a Spider-Man T-shirt, you know, as a kid, and then have the balls to actually wear it to school, you were probably going to get made fun of or get into a fight or something. Whereas now, all that shit has become so, you know, acceptable, and so in you know, not only that it makes, you know, massive amounts of money for, you know, the Disney owns Marvel and all these superhero movies. It's just such big business where it was never like that, you know. Growing up, it was you were the weirdo, you know, for sure.
Well, I remember the first time. I have a young nephew and niece. My nephew's 9, and he's very into video games and Minecraft and a lot of pop culture stuff that I'm into. And I remember I went with him and my sister-in-law to JCPenney once. I haven't been there in years and years because it's not where I shopped. And we walked past this kiosk that was literally covered, wall-to-wall T-shirts, Superman, Spider-Man, video games, all this stuff. And they were like $6 a pop. And like everybody was wearing these shirts. And I'm just like, where was this when I was, you know,
for sure,
in high school? I had to pay $20 at Hot Topic for the only Venom T-shirt they had. And that was it. No choice, no nothing. And then I got beat up the next day at school for wearing a Venom T-shirt. Because I had the gall to correct someone when they said, "Oh, that's Black Spider-Man." I went, "Well, actually, it's Venom because the logo is bigger." They didn't care after that. It's just beat him up. He's not making sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's so funny how accessible all this stuff is now. And before it was very like it was rare. Yeah, it was. And if you saw somebody that, you know, you thought you connected with, it meant something. You know, it's interesting.
Yeah. With the internet now the way it is, it's so much easier to connect with like minds, like between Facebook or forums or you know, websites devoted to specific nerd things. You know, it's so much easier to find your people. Whereas, you know, growing up before that kind of stuff, it's like, oh, there's the one kid that's in one of my classes that likes the thing I like. So we'll talk about it when I see him in that one class. So the next thing I wanted to ask is, because I'm actually curious, because I don't know myself, I don't remember seeing it anywhere. Where did the name, I'm guessing that the name Powerman 5000, Powerman is in reference to the Japanese hero, Powerman. Is that correct?
No, it's actually not. It's, when I was a kid growing up, I was a big, like, comic collector, Marvel Comics. Mm-hmm. And there is, it still is, but there was a superhero called Powerman.
Oh, okay.
He was essentially like the first black superhero, and Powerman, I think, was kind of in reference to Black Power. And for whatever reason, I don't know what, like some white kid growing up in the suburbs of Massachusetts, why this superhero, I connected with it. Like it was so cool. And like, and he would team up with this guy Iron Fist. So it was like, it was very 70s sort of blaxploitation feeling. Powerman was, you know, he had like an afro, and he would team up with Iron Fist, who was this kung fu master. And so it had that very much like kung fu blaxploitation vibe to it, and I just loved it. And so it just kind of stuck. And then I, you know, sort of added the 5,000. I probably at the time just in hopes of not getting sued by Stan Lee or something. But so I think at this point I'm probably safe. But you know, it came from Marvel Comics.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I actually recognize the name Powerman because Luke Cage is the hero that actually comes from Powerman.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that reminded me of it. Oh, okay. So
right.
That's pretty cool that it comes from comic books. I guess because in my head, because of the giant robots on the album covers and everything, that's where my brain went, you know.
Right. Yeah, that actually makes way more sense.
So obviously you're gearing up to go on tour with Hed PE. But while you're on tour, or when you're not on tour, when you're just home, when you're not writing music or working at a haunted house and doing, haunted themed stuff, what's your downtime kind of preferred hobby? Do you have one, or do you just write more music and work on more stuff?
There's not a ton of downtime because you get off the road and you're instantly working for like the next tour. That like I've been home. We just got back from Europe. We did a month in Europe doing all the like big festivals over there. I got home and I'm in the studio today working on a song for another like sort of secret side project I'm working on. I directed a video for another band a couple of days ago. This band Knee-High Fox, I directed their video, came out awesome. And then, but if you're asking me what I like to do when I'm not working on music or something related, I'm happiest when I'm sitting watching professional basketball. I'm like a huge NBA fan. I just love the sport of basketball. I like to play it. I like to watch it. And so that's sort of my anti-music, fascination. My non-nerd, moment is I'm actually like a big basketball nut.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I fell out of basketball after the strike years and years ago, and I try and keep up with it a little bit. I got more into football after that. But I was a diehard Chicago Bulls fan growing up. I love Jordan. Jordan still, to me, is one of the greatest players to have ever played. And I loved watching those games. Like, it blew me away. And my best friend at the time was a Knicks fan. So, of course, watching, like, Bulls versus Knicks games, there's a lot of contention in the room until somebody finally won. But all right, well, that's cool. And so you're gearing up to go on tour again really soon because the Hed PE tour starts pretty soon, doesn't it? The beginning of August, I think?
Yeah, we leave. Yeah, I think our first show is August 2nd. I think we're just missing the first one. But yeah, so a couple weeks.
Very cool. And so you said you're working on a super secret project, which is obviously super secret. What do you have any plans for big video singles or events for Powerman 5000 coming up?
Yeah, I don't know. We're talking about what the second single will be. How to Be a Human was the first single, and that did a radio, and now we're looking at the what the next single might be, and so I guess fairly soon we'll know what that's going to be, and that'll go to radio, and really it's just about touring through at least through the end of the year, and I'm sure we'll do some more touring next year, and just just see what we can do. I mean, it's a crazy different time for bands, and certainly for bands like us. So. But I'm fully committed to this band and this album and, really, really believe in the quality of it. So, I just want to get out there and work as hard as I can to get people, on board. And part of that is, trying to have a bit more of a worldwide strategy. We just got back from Europe and it was just incredible. And just playing these massive festivals, in front of 100,000 people and, opening for Metallica and Iron Maiden and, and it's just, there's a level of appreciation over there that honestly I don't really see in America anymore, and it's kind of sad. Like it was inspiring, and it definitely like it got us all energized to come back and hit the road here. But it also shows you like that, sometimes, I feel like rock never goes away, and kids always love rock music, but I feel like in America it's taken a back seat, to a lot of other forms of music, and I feel like in Europe, they still seem to like really appreciate it, so it's kind of fun to be a part of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen that too. I think that also music is consumed so differently here now, and like I find with my friends personally that like no one wants to really go see a show anymore. Everyone's just content to kind of listen to stuff that they've got, and so I'm always eager to see a band live because I feel like a band who plays live well will always be better than anything they do on CD because it's that personal connection you make with a band is on a whole other level from just listening to them on a disc,
Yeah, and well, and also at this point, the live show is the last thing that you can't, recreate on your computer. The experience, you can't download the experience of being in a club and having ear-splitting volume and being in a room full of sweaty people fighting or whatever it is. The value of the live show, I hopefully will maintain for sure.
Yeah. The question I have about Builders of the Future is one of my favorite tracks on the record is actually I Want to Kill You. And it's because it's so unique to a lot of the other stuff that you guys normally do. You don't have a ton of acoustic tracks in your discography. So I really like that you kind of had this kind of twisted acoustic track. And I'm curious to hear more about how that kind of specific track came about.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a weird, we had basically the bulk of the record done. I was like, okay, we've got a great, solid Powerman record, but with every record, I like to try to do something, throw a twist at the end, or try something, something that's sort of a little left of center of what we do. And that song, I went in the studio and I did it with actually Evan, Evan Rodonice, who produced the record and used to be in Powerman. And he happened to have an acoustic guitar out from a session that he did the day before with another band. And I had literally just the idea of "I Want to Kill You" as like a song title.
Right.
And so I was like, well, let's just, just pick up the acoustic guitar, and we started fucking around, and we literally just wrote and recorded the song probably in a few hours. It just kind of fell together. And I don't generally work that way. Usually it takes me a while, and it just fell together. And it was, it was one of those songs that was, it was unique for us because, it's sort of the most, I guess, for lack of a better term, personal song. And sometimes I don't write that kind of stuff, where you just kind of lay it out there and have it be like, wow, fuck, this seems like it's sort of something real, you know what I mean? So it was, it's a bit of a risk, I suppose, for us, but a lot of people do bring up that song when they talk about the record, because I think it is such a surprise when you get to that track. And it's not just some throwaway track, track 13 hidden, we feature it, and it's like a, it's part of the record, not just some weird bonus thing, So I'm glad we did it. I'm really proud of that song. I feel like it does something that I've never done before. So it's always nice after 20 years later, you can still go, hey, I did something different,
Right, something that keeps you invested and keeps the experience constantly unique and surprising.
Sure.
which is always good. Yeah, I mean that's I think why I noticed it personally as someone who connects to music on an emotional level more often than not, and hearing this very, song that seems from a more personal place. I was like, oh, awesome, this got some weight, and I like the other stuff too, but it's kind of nice to have that breakup of, these different things. I mean, you guys have always kind of tried to change things up, like on the earlier records, throwing in covers on every couple of albums, doing a cover album, which is really cool, kind of changing it up and reinventing yourself.
Yeah, well, you have an audience that you kind of have to serve, on one hand, but you have to serve yourself as well. And, you have to always, because if it's not fun or interesting, then there's no point in doing it, so it's always, I'm always trying to figure out the next thing. And although I'm very comfortable where the band is now, like I don't need to reinvent the wheel anymore for the band. I feel like I've come back full circle and like this kind of electronic metal thing. I really feel like that's who we are, and just the whole point now is just do it better and better every time you try to make a record,
Yeah, and also, I mean, back when you guys were first kind of coming on the scene too, like new metal bands and bands that did that kind of a thing there were a lot of them, and not a lot of them stood the test of time, but you guys have kind of always been around and come back. So I think you've kind of firmly planted yourself in where you guys fit, and there's a market for it, and you guys are making these records that obviously connect with your fans because they've stuck by you,
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the formula of longevity is just not stopping. I mean, it's true. You just a lot of bands come and go, and they, and things they work in waves, and you just got to be prepared to ride it, and you just never know what's going to happen. As long as it's still fun and interesting, and you still feel like you have some things to prove, and there's no point in stopping.
Sure. The next thing I was curious about is, because obviously as a fan of the music, I have a personal favorite song, but I was curious if you have a song that like you prefer to perform live, or that's your favorite because you like, the energy behind it on stage, or that it's kind of like a selfish choice and you can't pick one. They're all your favorite.
I mean, it's hard to say, I mean, I think generally playing new material is always the most fun because it's, playing the new stuff off this new album when we go out live is always are my favorite moments of the live show now. Playing Invade, Destroy, Repeat, the first song on the record is probably the most fun that I have in the new live set. You know what I mean? It just, there's something about it, and it, playing new songs makes you feel like, oh, you don't know what's going to quite happen, because you haven't played them 10,000 times before. So I wouldn't say I have a particular favorite, but, whenever there's a new record, I always enjoy playing the new material, for sure.
Awesome. And so obviously we covered earlier that you're very heavily influenced by pop culture and a lot of nerdy things like comic books and movies. Where does the musical influence come from? I mean, obviously you were a fan of rock and roll, I imagine, but what artists were like your idols growing up that influenced you to go in a direction towards music?
Oh, I mean, without a doubt, punk rock changed my life. Like it was, when growing up as a kid, we all listened to the radio and music to me as a little kid seemed very like distant, very magical. I didn't have any idea like how to make music or, it just sounded like this weird stuff coming out of the radio. And then when I discovered bands like the Clash and the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and Black Flag, and I was like, fuck. Well, first of all, it blew my mind because it was like, this is unlike anything I've ever heard, and it seems like it's from another planet, from where I came from, But I also heard like, I understood it, and I was like, well, fuck, I might be able to do that. Like that guy's not the greatest singer in the world, or this guitar player is not playing a million notes, and it just seemed like I could wrap my head around it. But beyond that, it was really the attitude of it. Music to me before I've heard punk rock was very passive, something kind of in the background or, Elton John or something like great, but just like it didn't make me want to like get up and fucking get into a fight or whatever. Just like, but when I heard that, the aggression and the simplicity of that stuff, that's what inspired me to get involved with music. And then then the same thing happened when I started to listen to like rap music. It was the same kind of feeling, hearing like Public Enemy or NWA. I was like, fuck, like the aggression, like it just really resonated with me. And also the fact that here we are, another form of music that like, you didn't even need to play an instrument, you know what I mean? Like, and you didn't even need to be able to sing, so that really connected with me. And then fast forward to like electronic music, same kind of thing. It's a very non-traditional approach to making songs. So all those things came together and affected me.
How early did you start singing or playing music?
I was in high school, really. I started a band in high school when I was probably like 14 or 15, and I played bass and sang. It was a punk rock band called Vital Interest. We were very like political, and we were just terrible. Like I would literally write songs, that had 2 or 3 notes, and we would just play the talent show and get booed off the stage, and So, but that was when I started. It was like, just loved the idea of it. I love the idea of being in a band. Sort of like, it's like when people are like compelled to join a gang, it's like, it was kind of like that feeling, like it's your fucking band, it was like that. It was really like, I liked that idea, just the concept of it, what I mean, almost more than anything else. And so, and so that's when I started. And then after high school, I went to art school for like literally a couple months and then dropped out because I was like, I can paint when I'm 80. Like I want to make music. And that's when I started to try to put bands together in Boston and finally put Powerman together. I actually started doing like more of a solo thing first. It was more of a rap thing. And then I missed the aggression of like live instruments. And then Powerman sort of formed out of this solo rap thing I was trying to do at the time. And so, so Powerman was like really my first real band, I wouldn't really count my high school band as a real thing. It's just, trying to figure out something to do. Yeah, trouble.
And so were you born in Boston? Is that your hometown? Is that where you're from?
Well, I was born in a town like 45 miles north of Boston called Haverhill, Massachusetts, which is like a little factory town. But then then moved to Boston after high school.
Doesn't sound like a very rock and roll town.
Haverhill or Boston? I mean, Boston was very, very music centric. I mean, there was like so many great bands that came from there. No, sure, of course. I was more making a joke about Haverhill was not. Haverhill was very much like a wasteland of. No, it was a town. It was just factories and just nothing really much to do but get into trouble. And I think that's why I sort of became sucked in with like TV and movies and stuff. It sort of like it was an escape. It was like a window to like other possibilities in life.
Sure. Did you have a favorite? Do you now, or did you then have a favorite sci-fi TV show or movie that's still like at the top of your list these days?
Yeah. I mean, I was always a huge nut for the original Star Trek, the William Shatner version. I loved it growing up and still do. I just think there's something really fucking. It's almost like a Andy Warhol painting or something. There's something so bizarre and simple about it, but it's, I just love that show. And I mean, growing up, I liked old sci-fi movies. I liked 50s sort of like Cold War stuff a lot, like them and things like that, because I love the paranoia around all those movies. But I love, the first Alien, was a 2001 Space Odyssey, and Blade Runner, and Mad Max. I mean, there's so many great science fiction movies that came out like in the 70s, and I just really, those are the ones that I guess I connected to the most.
Yeah, they seem to stand the test of time. Those
great.
particular
You
movies.
watch 2001, which was made in what? I don't even know what year. I can't remember. Like early 60s, and the effects have not been surpassed. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean that soundtrack too for that movie. Like, I mean, without it, the impact of half of the pivotal scenes would not be the same without that killer orchestration.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, I don't mean to rush you, but if they're like calling me back in to try to work on this song. So if there's any like I don't know, we're kind of like just chatting like we're friends on the phone. But so if there's let's do like a couple more, and I'll try to keep them brief because I know I just ramble on and on.
No, it's fine. I mean, essentially, the goal for this is to use it to write an article for Broken Records, and then I'm going to use the audio for. I have an audio podcast, and so I mean,
okay.
if you have
right
if you have a time limit and you need to go, just let me know. I mean, I'm not trying to.
I should probably. I didn't realize. Like, I didn't know. They didn't give me like a time frame on the interview, so I didn't know. But I just don't want to keep them waiting, and they're probably like wondering what the fuck I'm doing. So
no problem.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to chat. I will definitely let you know when the article, you and my contact for you, when the article goes up and when the audio podcast goes up. But I appreciate you taking the time to chat, Spider.
No, totally. It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
I mean, as a huge Powerman fan for a long time, it's a pleasure to get to talk to you and chat music. And I'll definitely come over and say hi once you guys make it to New York.
Well, we'll do the follow-up in New York.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, part 2. Yeah.
I would totally love that. Thank you, Spider.
Right.
I appreciate your time,
Let's
man.
do it. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
If you enjoyed these interviews, please subscribe to this and the Crash Chords podcast on iTunes, where you can also rate us and review us. You can also like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Crash Chords Web, our Tumblr, and our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post in the comment area below each post. And keep the discussion going, because remember, music is life, and life is good.